Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sherlock Conversations. It's been a while, and I am on the phone with my friend Randy Williams, author of Sherlock Holmes and the Autumn of Terror. It is a story of Sherlock taking on Jack the Ripper. However, there's a twist to this. It is actually based on Randy's real life um, solving of the Jack the Ripper case, and it is a very fascinating case. And do you mind if we go ahead and ruin it for the people because we've already had the chance to talk to you?
Oh no, I think it's fine. It's fine if you mean spoilers?
Yeah, spoilers.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, it's totally fine.
okay. You had solved it, and we can confirm that what you believe was the murder of Jack the Ripper is actually a conspiracy, and it was by a Russian man who had a socialist bent to try and make, was it the people, like the constables look bad? I forget the
That was
particulars,
part of it.
but
That
it
was
was,
part of his motivation. It wasn't strictly to do that, but that was definitely part of the plan, and it's definitely part of the anarchist strategy.
that's what it was.
That the strategy they use is to ridicule the police whenever possible. And so it definitely was part of it to make fun of the constables, but certainly not the main motive.
Okay, gotcha. So, but we can confirm it was it was basically a political move, i.e., anarchists, and we can also confirm that it was more than one person, and we can also confirm that it is nobody that is a common household name like the Queen of England, any relation to the
No,
Queen of England, as well as like all the typical theories that have been bandied about, from the author of Alice in
no,
Wonderland to Walter Sickert.
no. Yeah, and it never is. I mean, look at any serial killing case we've had right here in the United States. I mean, is it ever Harrison Ford doing it?
Yeah,
You know, is it ever like the president's son? Is it? It's not. It's always this guy that you end up. All his neighbors end up saying, "Oh, he was such a great guy. He used to take the garbage out for us. With, when it snowed, he used to come over and shovel." It's never this guy that's famous person. I think the problem with that is that people only have. There are only so many people from the 1800s that you can actually research, and most of them have some sort of fame attached to them.
right.
So you can research Lewis Carroll, you can research Arthur Conan Doyle, or some of these other people, because there was a lot written on them. But there was these huge masses of people living in Whitechapel that were undocumented, probably in more ways than one. And those are the pool of people. That is the pool of people that you have to choose from as suspects. As far as conspiracy theories go, people automatically want to assign a tin hat to anyone who proposes a conspiracy. But, criminal conspiracies are so common. There are probably 3,000 of them going on right now. Criminal conspiracy just means two or more people working together to commit a crime.
Right.
It's a criminal conspiracy if we decide we're going to rob the next door neighbor's house and we both go in. That is a criminal conspiracy.
Right.
If we both decide we're going to go in and murder someone together, that is a criminal conspiracy. So it's got a bad name. It almost has a bad ring to it to say conspiracy, but it is something that is constantly going on in the criminal world.
Right, right. Well, conspiracy theory these days means something along the lines of, well, we really know that it's the Freemasons and the reptile aliens that are really running things. That's where all
Well,
that
they are, aren't they? I thought they were,
comes.
aren't they? Okay.
Nice. So, but anyway, now one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you tonight was because was very curious about your perspective on things. Um, you wrote this book several months ago, maybe about a year ago, that it was
Yeah,
officially,
about a year ago.
yeah, that it was officially published. You've been making the
Hmm.
rounds talking about it. In that time, I imagine that your perspective on a lot of things have shifted. Now, I wanted to ask you, what you've written and what you've solved, are you now more adamant that what you have discovered is the correct way, or have you
Oh yeah.
shifted your perspective at all in anything to allow for some things or to disallow for some things? Are you 100% more positive than you were, say 18 months ago?
Yes, every day more positive. And here's why. Since I wrote the book, I found more evidence against my suspects, which it doesn't take any great detective work. It's low-hanging fruit. Because they left behind evidence, no one ever bothered to look at them is the reason no one ever saw it. But the more time passes, the more evidence that I pick up. For example, after I started writing the book, I found that Samuel Friedman had a rape conviction in 1886, 2 years before the Ripper crimes. But then again, I continued researching on him, and I also found he had burglary convictions before that, which I did not know when I wrote the book, so they're not in there. Although I guessed it, and in the fictional part of the book, I did have him doing some local burglaries of churches and things around Whitechapel. But actually, he did have a burglary conviction and a theft conviction for stealing watches. So it turns out that I found more evidence that makes me even more certain about my suspects. And just recently, I was contacted by this anarchist researcher in England who gave me a bunch more information on Prince Kropotkin and his connection to the IWMEC, the International Working Men's Educational Club, and more that points to their use of violence and their stance against England and all of the things that I named as their motivation. You know, I told you that the motive last time we talked was propaganda. It was race, religion. You know, it was a form of propaganda, the killing of the women. You know, it was salacious. It attracts the public's attention. Murder of women in Whitechapel, and they were trying to bring attention to Whitechapel. They wanted the world to see the seamy the underbelly of England. They wanted to see the poverty. They wanted people to look at
Right.
the disease, the prostitution and crime, the murders that were taking place. So that was their main motivation. I mean, they were also very much against Catholicism, or at least Christianity, and they were anti-capitalism. And so what they were doing was a form of propaganda. And they left behind yet more evidence, which I'm just starting to dig through now, because I was, with the book's popularity, I've been getting contacted by people around the world, mainly England, and they're saying, oh, I have this bit of information that ties in with your theory. So to answer your initial question, I'm even more certain now than I was then, although I really didn't have any doubt a year ago, or I never would have written the book, because I'm very much against accusing people and slinging their names through the mud, like some people have done with some famous personalities,
Right.
without any evidence. And there is no evidence because they didn't do it. There's circumstantial stuff that makes them look like they might have done it, but there's certainly nothing conclusive that shows that they did do it. Yet people seem to have no problem dragging someone's name through the mud and accusing them of the most heinous crimes you could imagine. I would
Right.
never do that without sufficient evidence. So I had ample evidence at the time of the writing of the book a year ago, but even more now, to answer your question, yes.
Gotcha. Now, do you plan is obviously you have talked about in the past of doing a non-fictional version of your book.
Yes, it's in the works.
And is this one of these things where you're kind of like, oh, now I need to go back and rewrite chapter 3 based on what has been given to me?
I probably could. And maybe I should, because there's just more. But people, I've had really been very lucky and got very nice reviews on Amazon for the most part. I've gotten some very good reviews. And I got to say, I think I've had maybe 6 negative reviews, or I wouldn't even say negative. Only 2 really negative reviews, but there were a couple people that said, the book was great, but it was too long. And I thought, well, it kind of had to be too long. And one of them actually alluded to the fact that, but it needed to be,
Right.
That long. And so I'm a little bit loath to make it any longer. I might have to just change a few paragraphs here or there. But I think what I have to do really is present everything in this new nonfiction version of my story.
Right, right. Now, as you've been going around sharing your book, what has the response been from from people that you've been interviewed, or have you been taking callers? Like, has anybody challenged you on your.
Well, you can hear that my dog's at the moment are
Yes,
excited about it.
yes.
But they has anyone challenged me? Well, sure. I've had people come on. The typical hate type message that you get when you do anything in this world, whether it's a martial arts book or anything else. Some of that. But I haven't had anyone contest my theory with any sort of counter argument. For example, if you're going to tell, I've had people tell me my theory was stupid, ridiculous, preposterous was a good one. Had to look that word up, and it turned out that that the people that were mostly against my theory had some dog in the fight, whether they had their own book out or their own web page or whatever. But in any case, no one so far has come up to me and said, your theory is bunk because Dean Schutz was out of the country at the time of the murders, because Isaac Kozabrodsky left the country after, or didn't get to the country until. It's always sort of very subjective. Oh, I didn't like your theory. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense to me. Well, that's all fine and dandy, and everyone has that prerogative. But so far, no one has come up and said, yeah, it can't be true because this. It can't have happened that way because of that. There is no counter evidence. And I'm my own worst critic. When I was writing this, I was looking. In fact, that was part of my approach initially to name the guilty parties, was once I found someone that looked suspicious to me, my main duty in life was to exonerate them, to find things that would make them innocent. And I did that with quite a number of suspects, some that are famous suspects. But when it came to my guys, the reason I chose them as suspects, they almost chose me because I couldn't. The more I would try to exonerate them, the guiltier they would begin to look to me. And that's still the case now. So it turns out that, the more you look at them, the worse they look, not the better. And, I invite anyone. I don't mind a little debate. And I would like someone who contests my theory to tell me exactly why it could not be true, and to try to prove to me that Louis Diemschutz and Isaac Kozabrodsky did not have guilty knowledge about grapes in the hand of Elizabeth Stride, one of the victims of the double event, or that Diemschutz did not make statements to the police about how the previous victim had been dressed, which no one could possibly know except the killer or his accomplice, because even the police didn't know how she was dressed because her clothes were ruined and covered in blood. So he made statements that showed he was guilty. And, of course, he could make the thing up about the way she was dressed, but you couldn't make up the grapes because the bloody grapes were found in Dutfield's yard 2 days later by some private detectives. So it proves that there were grapes there, but how only the killer would know, and the victim. So, those bits of evidence just can't be contested. There was an eyewitness to the double event who said it was a Jewish man with an accomplice who chased me away. And I know they were Jewish because they used a Jewish surname. One called it out to the other when he saw me, and the other chased me away. So, that automatically exonerates half of the field that are Gentiles, non-Jews. Because why would, I don't want to use names of a suspect, but why would a certain famous personality who was not Jewish use such a code word with an accomplice who, by the way, no one else has ever named? In my case, I don't throw away any of the evidence because it all fits. And why? Because my guys did it. That's why it fits.
Going back to doing like the investigations and everything, you yourself are a private investigator in when you're not writing. Am I correct? Or you've had a background in private investigation?
Well, yeah, I'm a licensed private investigator in the state of Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Now, when you're doing something, do you have to prevent yourself from coming up with a conclusion? Like someone says, hey, go follow my husband to see if he's cheating on somebody. Do you do those type of jobs? Like you'll follow the person kind of? Yeah,
I have. I don't like those kind of jobs, but I have done them, and I will continue to do them as necessary, but those aren't my favorite kind of jobs at all.
Right. But do you go in there already, like, do you have to make yourself think, okay, this guy's an adulterer, or I'm here to give the guy the benefit of the doubt and provide the
Well,
alibi for it. Like what
those
is your
cases are,
approach to the?
yeah, those cases are a little different. When, those aren't a who done it type of case. That's a case of someone wanting someone followed and see what they're up to. So you basically, you're neutral. You just follow the person and document what they're doing. You're
Right,
not you're not assuming that they're cheating, and you're basically just following them. Now, if there are other ways to dig and see if they're cheating besides following them, and that would be a case where you would pretty much presume that there's a possibility, like any criminal case, there's a possibility this guy is my suspect. There's a possibility this guy is guilty of the crime I'm investigating. So you look at him with the possibility. You can't be completely sort of naive about it, or you wouldn't even be able to choose a name out of the hat.
right,
So you would assume that there's a good chance this person's guilty. I think the cheating husband scenario is not a great one because that's those type of cases. First of all, no private investigator likes to do those, and those cases are basically follow him, document, take pictures of what he's doing. He might be out with his sister. You don't know. You just take a
right,
picture. You bring the picture to his wife, and oh, that's his sister. Well, fine. But when it comes to a case like the Ripper or a murder or some sort of a serious crime, I think it was our friend Sherlock Holmes that said it was a capital mistake to draw conclusions and make your evidence fit your conclusion,
right,
rather than to let your conclusion fit the evidence.
right,
So you
right,
have to dig the evidence out. I mean, how heavily influenced I was by Sherlock Holmes. I am
right,
by him and my investigative methods, and that's really one of the major stumbling points with some investigators is to draw a conclusion, this is my killer, and then find everything they can to make that person look bad. And they sometimes might be right when they do that, but it leaves a lot of margin for error. What you want
right,
to do, at least in my opinion, is like I said earlier, I do the opposite. I try to make my guy look innocent. I try to take the standpoint of a criminal defense attorney, and I try to make the guy look like he didn't do it. I try to find everything possible that they would dig up that would show he didn't do it. And not because I'm looking to counter his defense, but because if I find something that shows he couldn't have done it, I'm not going to waste my time anymore looking at this guy.
right, right. So, right, because that's right. You also had one of the things that you mentioned was you had this algorithm of sorts
Yes, I
that you
do.
worked with, where you basically fed all the information into it, and it basically said, here are the suspects that we believe that did X, Y, and Z, that were involved with this. And you were able to go through, like, what was it? You went from like a couple hundred people down to like 20 people, down to like 10
Down
people,
to
and so
five.
forth. Yeah.
Got
And
winnowed it down to 5 people. Yeah.
right. And basically, because that's what I was asking was, is that when you were like, when you got through each of the people that you were working on, you're like, we have this person. You were talking about how you were actually going, well, maybe he just happened, like, did he happen to have an apartment near where, like, was he friends with someone or have an apartment near every one
hmm
of these places where there was a Ripper victim type of thing?
Yep.
Can we rule that out type of thing? Were those the type of questions that you asked yourself when you were going through this?
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, there are a lot of questions that I go through, and as people drop through this sort of set of filters that I have developed, they become less and less likely to be my suspect, to be my killer or the guilty party. So in the case of the Ripper, I started with well more than 200 names. It was closer to 1,000 names, and I
Right,
dropped out 5 at the end. And of those 5, 3 of them were my guys.
right,
Kropotkin never appeared. Kropotkin's name never even appeared. He only came out after I started to dig into these 3 guys' background.
right, right. Now, as you've been doing this, have you been like, have you like continuing on? Like again, you've it takes a lot of if I could use a Jewish word, chutzpah, to say, hey, this mystery that's been around for over 120, 130 years, I've solved it. That takes a lot of, like, again, that takes a lot of guts to be able to say something like that. So how sure of it were you before you finally, like, did you tell anyone that this is what you were working on, or was this one of
Well,
these things where you just like, you know what, I've worked on it, I've gone through this about 100 times, I'm 100% sure these are the people that were involved?
well, anyone close to me knows I've been working on this case for over 40 years in
Hmm.
some fashion, and everyone who knows me knows it's been an obsession of mine for many years. But I became very certain in 2012 that I had cracked the case, and I had all this evidence behind me to back my claims. But certainly when I met Dr. Michael Baden and ran my evidence by him and convinced him that I was correct, it bolstered my confidence to be able to go out in the world and say, yeah, I solved this thing.
Right, right. Now, what was your initial, like, why did you want to solve it? Because it seems like some people come up with, your theory of the week, make a book about it, and they're able to make a couple of bucks off of it and maybe
Oh
hopefully
no, it
get
wasn't about
some
no, no, it
s-
wasn't about money.
series. Like,
Certainly not.
what was your inspiration for it? Was it, were you just trying to crack a case, or was this like, was there something a little bit more closer to home for you that you said, hey, I really want to solve this?
Well, I belong to a select group of people throughout the world that called themselves ripperologists, meaning people fascinated with the Ripper case. And
Right.
and I would not say fans of Jack the Ripper, because I'm no fan of his. I absolutely hate Jack the Ripper and everything he stood for. But I was and am an aficionado of the Ripper case, the solution to the Ripper case.
Right.
And so ripperologists are sort of, many are armchair detectives, many are actual detectives, but people with a fascination with the case. And this has been something that I've been very interested in since I was a young boy. My mom used to collect those, or still does collect those, true crime novels. You may have seen the ones that have the pictures of the case in the middle, and you're not supposed to look at them until you get to them because they're spoilers, but I look at them anyway.
Right,
And
right.
well, I've been reading those since I was a young boy, and been fascinated with the methodology used by the police to catch the killers. And so, and some of the weird coincidences that always come up in these cases. Like, for example, the killer is almost always convicted or executed on the victim's birthday, or the anniversary of the killing. So, I was always fascinated with those things. And so, but the Ripper case stood head and shoulders over all of those, because all the other ones that the books were written on were solved. And
Right.
you knew who did it. You knew who the perpetrator was. But in the case of the Ripper, it's this unsolved mystery. And a lot of people, I mean, I love a mystery, and it's sort of a challenge to, especially as you grow to become a detective. You take it on as a personal challenge. At least I did. I thought, if I'm going to test my mettle as a detective, this is the case to solve. I'm also in the
Right.
martial arts, and in the martial arts, it can be very competitive. And I like to think I was fairly successful in the martial arts world. And how are you going to do that? You're going to test yourself in different ways. You're going to have to prove yourself in different ways. To be the top, if you're going to reach the top in the martial arts world, you've got to train harder than everybody else, be smarter, produce more work, be more prolific. And as a detective, I looked at it the same way, and I thought, if I want to prove my mettle as a detective and really make a name for myself in the world of private investigation or investigation, then what better case to do that with than the all-pervasive Jack the Ripper murder mystery?
Right, right. Now, when the last time we talked, one of the things that you said that your goal to do in the future was that you would like to go to England and actually find out what happened to the, I guess you could say the underlings,
Accomplices?
that, yeah, the accomplices. You were saying, like, you wouldn't be surprised if you found out that one of them accidentally hung himself, and I say that in quotes, or one of
Hmm.
them accidentally was hurt on the job and he ultimately died from that.
Run over
Um,
by a horse cart in the street or something, and didn't even make the
yes,
news because they were just footnotes in history.
right. With the new information that you've been getting, can you have people do that now? Like, do you have like a network of people that you can say, hey, could you do me a
Yes,
favor, since you're out there, do you mind looking this up or seeing what you can find
yes.
about this?
Yeah, I've got, with the martial arts connection, I've got students in England and friends that are involved in the same martial art that I am. And I do have a guy over there. I don't know if I should say his name on the
No.
in this interview, but I do have a guy over there who will go and dig through the archives for me. I just point him where to go, and he goes and gets me information. And I do have him at the moment looking into some stuff about Louis Diemschutz's stay in Pentonville prison, because he dug up for me earlier that Diemschutz was, we knew he was sentenced to jail, but we never knew where he served time. Well, we figured it out that it was Pentonville prison, so I sent him to look for Pentonville prison records. So I'm hoping in the near future to come up with a mugshot, because that was the era where photography was beginning, and there may very well be mugshots of Diemschutz from his stay at Pentonville prison. I'd love to have some photographs of him, and maybe any other information that, you know, he might have done something at Pentonville prison that might still remain in the records. You know, I work in a prison myself, and when they have visits, it's recorded. You know, who came to visit him, what was said, what kind of trouble did he get into, what sort of people did he ally himself with in the jail, sort of like a gang.
Right.
What other criminals did he associate with? And I might find some really interesting stuff there as well.
Right, right. That's really fascinating. Just again, because here we are talking about this. We talked about this several months ago, and just to find out that you're getting more information about this and everything. Now, one of the other things that makes your book so unique is that you've had some very, very famous forensic professionals that have signed off on your book. Have they talked to you about it afterwards? Like, have they said to you, yeah, you know what, you really did have something good here, and I looked at it a second time and I'm like, now I'm even more convinced. You know what I mean? It's like they just keep coming back to your theories, looking at it and going, wow, this really is good.
Well, I'd love to say that, but, you know, and I've seen them quite a number of times since the book was written, and of course they have nothing but kind words for me. But all three of them are extremely busy guys, and I think they've looked at the evidence that I had initially enough to, and believed in it enough to put their names on my book. And I'm certain that they're still convinced that I'm correct. I haven't received any calls from the doctor saying, you know, on reconsidering, you know, I'll pull my name off that book. And so, and I know they've all been contacted a number of times by reporters and different people to discuss their position on the book. And so far, nothing but kind words from my co-authors. But to answer your question, no, they haven't called me back and said, hey, you know, I read the book again and I'm even more convinced now than I was before. It's more a case of I'm still just as convinced as I ever was.
Right. That's awesome. That's to know that your book was able to get that type of backing and everything. Gotcha. Now,
I mean, we should mention it's Dr. Michael Baden, who used to have the Autopsy TV show, you know, worked on the Kennedy assassination, O.J. Simpson case, Tsar Nicholas of Russia, Sid Vicious, Klaus von Bülow case, Phil Spector case, many, Medgar Evers, the Hands Up, Don't Shoot, Michael Brown. He even did Bruce Lee's autopsy, or worked on the results of it. Dr. Wecht, you know, who everyone knows from 48 Hours and, you know, all the forensic file shows and things that he appears on, also worked on the Warren Commission, the death of Robert Kennedy, Elvis Presley, O.J. Simpson, John Benet Ramsey, you know, Mary Jo Kopechne, the woman that was drowned with Senator Ted Kennedy, Dr. Jeffrey McDonald, the Green Beret that supposedly killed his whole family, the Waco Branch Davidian fire, in, you know, Vincent Foster, the assistant to the Clintons. So, and then Dr. Henry Lee, who, you know, also worked with the Kennedy review of the Warren Commission, O.J. Simpson case. John Benet was responsible for the safe return home of Elizabeth Smart, the kidnapped victim from Utah. He used to have that show Trace Evidence on Court TV. So these are my three co-authors, in case some of your listeners don't know who they, or didn't know they were my co-authors.
Right. And also at the same time, I do want to point out that Dr. Lee was featured in How Sherlock Saved the World, or if I got that title correct. It was basically Change the World, that's what it was. That appeared on PBS, that was discussing how Arthur Conan Doyle's influence of Sherlock Holmes actually helped inspire the CSI movement of today, type of thing. So that was also, again, it's all going back to Sherlock and everything. Now, if I can go in kind of a more fanciful direction, are you able to actually watch Jack the Ripper movies and specials. Like, we
Oh yeah.
chatted on Facebook not too long ago because I was telling you about how much fun I enjoyed Batman Gotham by Gaslight, which was basically
Hmm.
it was basically um, characters from the Batman universe that were involved in the Jack the Ripper murders, but in like the circa 1800s. And
Hmm.
Batman, or Bruce Wayne, shows up dressed as Batman and everything, and he's helping fight who Jack the Ripper is. And I'm not going to ruin it, but there are
Hmm.
some two really big Sherlock mentions and nods in the book or in the video, and it's just
Hmm.
a lot of fun. That, and I enjoyed
Hmm.
it. Are you able to watch it, or is this like, like a magician watching another magician perform and go, oh, he's got
Well, I'm
the
probably no.
extra card tucked
Yeah, I'm
under
probably
his
no
arm?
fun to watch a Ripper movie with, because I would be saying, well, that's wrong, that's wrong. But
Right.
but what I see with the specials where they talk about Jack the Ripper, mainly the documentaries, and they're always trying to lean you towards one suspect or the other. They always get to Louis Diemschutz, and they're just about there, and then they make a wrong turn, because
Mm,
they always say, oh, and this guy Louis Diemschutz came along and found, and they never realize. They always say he probably interrupted the Ripper in his work, and that's why he didn't tear up Elizabeth Stride the way he did the other victims. And they always leave it there. But what they forget is, we know historically that the Ripper wasn't interrupted by Louis Diemschutz. He was interrupted by Israel Schwartz, the man I mentioned earlier, who saw a minimum of two guys committing the crime. One was an accomplice standing across the street guarding,
right.
who chased him away. So we know the Ripper was interrupted by Israel Schwartz, not by Louis Diemschutz. I don't know why they
Right.
continue to push that, but that's where they always go wrong, when they start naming off the suspects, and they say, oh, and then this poor guy, Louis Diemschutz, came and stumbled upon this body, and they always look at him in a sympathetic light, which is the way he portrayed himself, and he did a great job of
Right.
that. I got hats off to him, but when I watch the specials, I always see that they get close to pointing out Diemschutz, and then they make the wrong turn, and they all say Diemschutz interrupted the Ripper, but it doesn't make sense. Again, like many things in the case, on first glance sounds good, but when you really think about it, back in those days, if you were committing a murder and you had an accomplice across the street, and a guy came along and shouted and was trying to help the female, then even though your accomplice chased him away, wouldn't you immediately stop what you were doing and try to escape? Because you knew
Right.
that this guy was running down the street screaming, and every cop in London was looking for Jack the Ripper. So that's where they were interrupted. That's why she wasn't mutilated the way that the Ripper was famous for mutilating women, because Israel Schwartz interrupted them, not
Right.
Diemschutz. So that's where I'll be watching a program and I'll say, hey, you forgot to mention Israel Schwartz. And they'll always forget to mention him if their theory doesn't match the evidence. So they'll forget to mention Israel Schwartz, and they'll always say Diemschutz interrupted the killer, but he didn't. He was the
Right.
killer. And so it makes it probably not fun to watch a Jack the Ripper special with me, or extra fun maybe, depending on your stance on the crime.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, like along the lines of kind of like, can you watch fictional takes on it? Like,
Oh
for
yeah, I watch
instance,
them
like
all.
from Hell, or my
Yeah,
favorite, which was Murder by Decree, which had
yeah,
Christopher Plummer as my favorite version of Sherlock in there.
yeah.
And
I love watching those things. Sure, I love watching.
right, right. Because the thing is that it strikes me you can take a few more liberties with a fictional account of it, more so than you could with like, hi, my name is Don Smith, and I'm hosting a look at Jack the Ripper for the Travel Channel, and let's take a
Right.
look at it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas that's where you would be like, no, let's get Schwartz and Deem shits mixed up there.
Well,
So,
sure. I mean, I did that with my book, didn't I? I mean, I was able to
yeah,
take literary sort of jumps. I was able to take liberties, because I for example, I ascribed a kidnapping and burglaries to them that I don't know that they did. It just turned out that I found out later that one of my suspects had been convicted for burglary. But when I wrote the book, I just made that sort of assumption and went with it as a literary device. But it turned out to have been true, because in most cases of serial killing, they did escalate from burglary. And so it was no great surprise that one of my guys was a burglar. But that was sort of a liberty that I took as a writer, that you can do with fiction that you cannot do with nonfiction.
Right. Right, exactly. Gotcha. So it seems like, and like I said, it just seems like it's just been met with universal, well, not universal, but it's been met with a lot of praise, and it seems like people really have enjoyed it and everything. Have you gotten responses back from, shall I say, like Scotland Yard or New Scotland Yard? Has like anybody said anything to you, like behind the scenes? Like have you heard
No,
from like behind the scenes famous people that have said, you got something here, or don't go
oh,
along
sure,
with this?
sure. Yeah, sure I have. And look at the firestorm of interviews I got after Dave Schrader from Coast to Coast interviewed me. Once Dave Schrader had me on, a lot of these the true crime guys that talk to all the heavy hitters had me on their show. So that gave me some credibility, I think, when Dave Schrader had me on and said to the world, I think this guy's cracked it. And then Jimmy Church had me on, Fade to Black, and he's another very well-known guy who's interviewed everybody who's anybody, and he's really hit the big time lately in the past few weeks. So, when these guys interviewed me, they've got an audience base, and it certainly helped me a lot to have both of them say on their program, listen, I've interviewed all of these guys, and this guy's got it.
Right.
That was certainly helpful to my case. And the reviews, the positive reviews on Amazon that I've gotten, some pretty heavy hitters in the criminal investigation world have done reviews for me. Like I had Detective Kenneth Maines, who has that Zodiac program right now on the History Channel. He did a very nice review of my book. F. Lee Bailey did a very nice review of my book. Some people that are heavy hitters out there. And more than them, there was a guy out in England, Jeff Cooper, who runs the Jack the Ripper Maps of Whitechapel and Spitalfields website, and he did a really nice review for me, and he's one of the top ripperologists in the world. I had Richard Jones interview me. He's the top of the top ripperologist authorities, and I just recently did a piece for him to be recorded in his website as one of the top 10 Ripper suspects. So
Nice.
he's not jumped in with both feet and said Randy has solved this thing, but he's certainly given me a lot of credibility in the Ripper world by featuring my theory as one of his top 10. The Crime Traveler website, they did a really nice review for me on Amazon as well. So I'm doing well in that arena, and I'm hoping that more and more people will be exposed to my book, and the right person will read it, and eventually something more can come of it. Maybe a movie, maybe a documentary series.
Right. Let me ask this. Speaking of like the Jack the Ripper, I hate to say the Jack the Ripper culture or the culture of the Ripperologists. You know that like if you look on Facebook for any amount of time, somebody announces that they're going to do a remake of something on TV that they just don't need. There's this glaring like, oh goodness, are you serious? Like if they decided, hey, you know what we need is a modern version of Gilligan's Island. And you'd get this like universal response of, oh, are you serious? We don't need any more remakes of stuff.
Right.
There's the kind of like a rolling of the eyes.
SWAT, Hawaii Five-0.
Yeah. If in the Ripper community, let's just say for argument's sake, if I were to say, you know what, I've cracked the Ripper murders. I'm going to name the suspect of Jack the Ripper is actually Robert Lincoln, the son of Abraham Lincoln. He happened to have been in London at this time, and I can prove it, and therefore he is the murderer now. Is there a kind of Facebook rolling of the eyes?
Oh yeah,
the
sure.
Ripper
The
community?
backlash. Oh yeah.
Yeah. When you see
if you
stuff
go on
like
Twitter,
that.
yeah, you'll see people will say, "Oh, yet another Jack the Ripper theory of the week." Who is it this week? Yeah, you get that a lot, and I think that there's a certain amount of that, but there's also a larger number of people out there that are curious, that want to know, and there's a whole new generation of people that don't even know who Jack the Ripper was. Don't even know about the case that could be brought into it. So yeah, I'm sure there's going to be those people that are going to say, "Oh God, another Ripper theory, and they already do, and that's fine.
Right.
Well, if you're such an expert on Jack the Ripper, don't watch my program, don't read my book.
Right.
It's okay.
Well,
You
I was
already
going
know
to
it.
ask. Right. I was going to ask if it was originally met with that, and then once people started going, "Hey, wait a minute, there's something to this." Like
Well, yeah.
there's something to this. It's like when they announce like what do you call it? One of my favorite movies, The Fugitive, with Harrison Ford. It was this rolling of the eyes of, do we really need another remake of this? But yet when you watched it, it's really a great movie on its own. And yes, there were a couple of obvious nods to the original series, but it stood on its own. Was there was that like when, like, week one of your book, hey, Sherlock Holmes and the Autumn of Terror, is there this, Randy Williams now has the Ripper of the week type of thing? And
Yeah,
then people
sure,
would
a
come
couple.
back.
A couple,
People
but
came
it
back
wasn't
with,
anything really prominent. There were a few, and I'm sure there were some that didn't post it. But yeah, there were some. But the reception was really quite good. And what surprised me was when I was on Jimmy Church's show, The Fade to Black. He said that the reason he came upon me was that he was interviewing another Jack the Ripper theorist at the time. He had him on the show, and he said he was getting call upon call upon call and email upon email from people saying, hey, you need to get this clown off your show and talk to Randy Williams. He's got the real deal. So it was really received well by a lot of people that didn't have a dog in the fight. Like I said, the people that have rolled the eyes and made the comments are generally people that have their own Ripper theory out there to promote, and so therefore mine is a threat to them. That's really the root of most of the negative stuff that I've gotten.
Right. And one last question that I wanted to ask. We've always joked in amongst my friends and me that that the worst thing that could ever happen to Loch Ness is them actually finding the monster or confirming that the monster is not there, because then that would pretty much dry up the tourism business for Loch Ness. Then would, if it could be like beyond a shadow of a doubt, you know what I mean?
DNA
like,
evidence.
Yeah, DNA and all that stuff, that you are correct. Would that be a bad thing for the Ripperologist community? Like,
no. It'd be bad for a lot of people that have invested their life blaming someone who was innocent, certainly. But I think those people would deserve it. I think that it would be a good thing, because I think you'd have a resurgence of interest in the case, where now you'd have people all over the world trying to dig more and more and more up about these guys and do more and more research on these guys and more about their motivation. And it would bring a whole new life to the case, because now we would know why he did it, why they did it, and what was done for what purpose. And we would be able to dig more and more. With the whole world looking at these guys, you'd find somebody that would say, hey, Friedman was my grandfather. I got a trunk of his stuff upstairs. And now we could look at that stuff in a new light, given the fact that we know he was one of the Rippers.
Right.
So I think that it would actually be good for the whole case, because you'd have this huge resurgence of interest.
Right. But at that same time, it's not exactly like, hey, we're explaining how Superman flies type of thing. Because like the joke that I've always heard, that once you start explaining how Superman flies, then you basically take the mystery and the fun out of this. But this is a straightforward, this is not something that should have mystery or fun.
I do see your point, but it was, after all, a series of brutal murders, and those women deserve the justice that any victim deserves. So regardless of our vicarious pleasure that we get from investigating a mystery, and that we love the fact that it's a mystery, and it should, for all of our benefit, should remain unsolved so that we can all have fun trying to figure out who it was, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that these were heinous murders of innocent women who did not deserve what they got, and they do in fact deserve justice. So to solve the crime and purposely not name the victim, or name the perpetrators rather, and the victims, they should be named to the world as well. It's to me, it's not doing justice to the victims. So for our pleasure, we should let their killer go unpunished, or unnamed rather.
Right.
I don't think so. I don't feel that our vicarious pleasure in researching the case should trump the victim's rights to have their killer named and shamed.
Right. Interesting perspective on that, Randy. Randy, if people want to, again, get your book, please tell them. I know you've got a fantastic Facebook page. And by the way, here's one of the things that Randy does. And the only other person that I've seen do this is this awesome comic book artist named David Hardy. But anytime somebody clicks like on the Facebook page, Randy goes out of their way to welcome them to the Facebook page. And I think
Oh yeah, I love
really,
to do that. Whenever
really
I get
cool
a new member, I'll welcome them to the page, and I'll put some sort of a interesting photograph with that, so the other readers aren't bored by it. So I'll get a member, and I'll say, welcome to this page, Don Smith, and then I will put a really neat picture from the old days on there of either a Jack the Ripper caricature or some sort of pertinent picture of a victim or something like that. And I try to tag the person. I can't always tag them, but when I can, I do.
Right. I got to ask though, where do you get some of those pictures? Because some of them are absolutely amazing.
I'm really fortunate in that respect. What I do every day is I search the web for people talking about Jack the Ripper in any fashion, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else, and I look for people that are talking about the case. And a lot of times people put up these pictures, and who knows where it came from. Some of them maybe drew it, some of them had it on their wall and scanned it and put it up. But I find it in the course of my research to look for people that are talking about the Ripper case so that I can tell them about my book. And whenever I find a really neat picture, well, I save it. And then I keep that on my computer. And then daily, as I get new members to the page, I release these photographs or these pictures.
Right. They're great photos. They really are. So really, really
well, thank
nice
you.
job.
Thanks for noticing. I didn't know anyone ever actually noticed that.
Right. They're really great photos. I mean, I just sit there and, because even just from the perspective, with things that I'm writing, I'm always looking for spooky, unusual things that I can pop up someplace, and you actually have a lot of fun with them. So.
Oh yeah. If you go to my Facebook page for the book, it's Randy Williams versus Jack the Ripper, versus VS.
Right.
You can find it, and then you can just click on photos, and you'll see a whole bunch of really cool photos. Even if you don't like my theory or my book, you can still enjoy, that huge bank of photographs I have there.
Right. Oh, they're great. Also, at the same time, when we put this up, or when we post this, I'm going to post a link to our original interview. That
good,
we
yeah.
did.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to post a link to Steph Young's interview that you did with her, because if it wasn't for Steph Young, I wouldn't have you. I wouldn't be able to call you a friend, which is really, really cool.
Yeah,
and,
she's our common connection. And maybe you could put put up a link to maybe my Facebook page or the Amazon page for the book.
All of
maybe
those.
You could link that animation I did on YouTube, that McCarthy letter, Jack the Ripper letter. That would be awesome if you could link that for your listeners.
I definitely will do that. Randy, thank you so much for this. Again, this was a little pull back the curtain. This was a total last minute thing. I asked you as a personal favor if you could come on. So thank you so much, and we're going to have this up.
Oh,
and
can't wait to see it.
Cool. Randy, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you, Don. It's been a pleasure doing this, and I look forward to seeing it.
Great. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. Have a great night, and take care.